Hello, and here we are again doing yet more logic awkwardly with Dr. Logic. In this video, I just want to kind of give a summing up overview of some of the things that we've been talking about in the past couple of videos, namely the different distinct modalities in S4, because it can sometimes be a bit difficult to have a clear idea of everything that is going on. We've got all these different modalities and these reduction principles, and these are equivalent and these are not, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what exactly is going on? Like, what are the things that we can say and how are they related to each other in S4? I will show you this via a implication diagram for S4 modalities. So what this is going from the strongest modality to the weakest, which one, if it is true, implies what other ones have to be true. So naturally, the strongest modality is necessity. So we'll put this at the top of the diagram, and the weakest is possibility. Now, whenever necessary phi is true, in S4, phi is also true, because S4 contains the T axiom. Similarly, and I have just realized that this is going to be a very ugly and awkward diagram, whenever phi is true, possibly phi is also true. But we've got the other modalities, the alternating modalities and the triple alternating modalities. Whenever necessary phi is true, necessarily, possibly necessary phi is true, and this has two implications itself. One is possibly necessary phi, and that just comes from the T axiom. And here we also get necessarily possibly phi. Each of these also implies the dual of this one here, namely possibly necessarily possibly phi, and from there to there. And both of these imply that phi is possible. So this is because of the T axiom. This is also from, well, it's from theorem T1. Similarly here, we get this via the T axiom, or the taxiom as my drawing shows. And similarly from this one down, we get T1. So this means we're left with three unlabeled implications, one going from possibly phi to, necessary phi to necessarily possibly necessarily phi, and from possibly necessarily phi to possibly necessarily possibly phi, and from that one down to the bottom. So these three implications are not immediate in the way that the other ones are just by appealing to one of the axioms, but these are implications that can be derived in S4. So I'm going to give you some homework. The first one says that show that if you can prove that phi is necessary, then you can prove that it is necessarily possibly necessary. Second piece of homework, if you can prove that, there's actually another one because we need to go from here to here. So I'm going to give you 4 pieces of homework. If necessarily, possibly, necessarily phi is provable, then you can also prove necessarily, possibly phi. 3, if you can prove possibly, necessarily phi, then you can prove possibly, necessarily, possibly phi. And finally, if you can prove possibly, necessarily, possibly phi, then you can prove possibly phi. And these are all one-directional implications, because if you could go the other way around, if you could go from possibly phi to possibly, necessarily, possibly phi, then these would not be distinct modalities, and S4 would have fewer than 14 distinct modalities. In fact, if we take all of these and turn them around, we will end up in a stronger system, system S5, which is going to be what we will start talking about next. So there you have a lovely implication diagram, 4 pieces of homework. go ahead and share with me your answers. You don't have to share all of them. 1 or 2 is good enough in the chat comments, and I will take a look and let you know how you get on. Until then, take care. Cheers.